Okay, today we're talking about percents. We're going to start off with percent of change, and then the last two questions will, they'll give us the percent, and we will need to find like the final price of something. So for percent of change, you need to understand what the words mean. I did give you a formula to use, which will be very helpful, but change, we will first figure out how much did the number change. So we subtract, which is what they show in the formula. And then to turn numbers into a percent, you need to divide by the original amount. So we divide by the first number and then multiply it by 100 to move that decimal over to turn it into a percent. So if you just follow the formula, you'll be fine. This means your second number minus the first number that they give you, divided by the first number that they give you, times 100. So we'll first figure out how much did it change. So it has 10 minus 16. Now, you can really subtract them in any order, but sometimes they'll ask you, was it an increase or a decrease? So, you can figure that out no matter how you subtract the numbers, because we went from $16 to $10, so it went down, it decreased. But there's also a way to figure it out at the end of the problem if you make sure that you do your second number minus your first number at the beginning. So again, you can subtract the numbers in any order. Just know that sometimes if you need to know increase or decrease, you can just look at the original problem and see, did it go up or did it go down? Okay, so we're finding the change we subtracted, and we divide it by the first number. So the first number was 16, and then times 100 to move the decimal over to make it a percent. So 10 minus 16 is negative 6, and you can use a calculator for this. And then negative 6 divided by 16 is negative 0.375. And then we will multiply by 100 to move that decimal over twice, so we get negative 37.5. So there is no such thing as a negative percent. So if you see a negative in your answer, it just means it was a decrease. If your answer is positive, it means it was an increase. But my final answer, even if it has a negative on it like this one, I'm going to write my answer as a positive number because you can't have a negative percent. So it's a 37.5% decrease. And I'm not going to write that it's a decrease because they already said decrease in the problem. So again, subtract the two numbers, divide by the first number, and then multiply by 100. And those are your steps. And the reason is because we subtract to find how much did the cost change. You divide because that's how you turn numbers into a percent. And then you multiply by 100 to move that decimal over to make it from a decimal to a percent. So for number 2, same thing. It went from 68 to 76, so I'm going to start by subtracting them to figure out how much did it change. And then we will divide by the original amount, so divide by 68, then times 100. So 76 minus 68 is 8. And I'm just rewriting the rest of the work as I go. 8 divided by 68 is a really long decimal, so I just did 4 numbers after the decimal, so 0.1176. And then times 100 will give you 11.76. So since this is a positive number, it tells me it was an increase, which I knew already because it went from 68 up to 76. So I'd write it's 11.76% increase. Now, these sort of problems, I actually had one of my friends who works for CMT in Nashville, and she texted me one day and said, I need to figure out what the percent of change is for this, and I have no idea how to do it, so I had to walk her through this. So this is a skill that some people will actually use. Okay, so the next question. Number 3, in 1995, there were 73,567 youth softball teams. By 2007, there were 86,049. Determine the percent of increase. Now, I should have written determine the percent of increase of the number of teams to tell you that I don't really care about the years. They're just there to mess with you. So first we'll figure out how much did the amount of teams change, so subtract them. And then we will divide by the original amount of teams, so 73,567, and then multiply by 100. So when I subtract those numbers, I'm going to get 12,482. And again, you can use a calculator for this. When we divide these two numbers, again we get a long decimal, so I just wrote 4 numbers after the decimal and rounded it, so 0.1697. I'm going to move that decimal over twice or multiply it by 100 to get 16.97%. Since it was a positive number, I know that it's an increase, but they already told me that in the problem. Now the next two problems, they tell you the percent. So there's a little bit of a shortcut to solve problems that give you percents. My rule is anytime you see percent, turn it into a decimal and multiply. To turn a percent into a decimal, all you do, so right now this is 33%. I don't see a decimal, but I know that there's one at the end of the number. You just move it over twice. You can also do this by dividing by 100. So 33% as a decimal is 0.33. So I turn it into a decimal and then I'm going to multiply. You multiply your only two numbers, 2450 times 0.33, and you get 8.085, which I'm going to round because that doesn't make sense when we're talking about money. So I'm going to round it to 8.09. Now this number is the amount that you are saving. They ask for the discounted price, so they ask for the new price. So if it was originally $24.50, I'm saving $8.09. To figure out the new price, you just subtract them. So discount, you subtract your two numbers. So $24.50 minus $8.09 would give you $16.41. And again, you can use a calculator for these as well. So if you see a percent, turn it into a decimal, multiply, and then since this was a discount, we subtracted what our price was minus how much we were saving to get the new cost. Number 5, the price of a used bookstore pays to buy a book is $5. The store sells the book for 28% above the price that it pays for the book. What is the selling price of the book? So I see a percent, so I'm going to turn it into a decimal and multiply. So multiply by 5. 5 times 0.28 is going to give me 1.4. So this is the amount that it's increasing. It is not the new price because they're going to sell it for more than $5. So they're not going to sell it for $1.40. So since they're selling it for more, because it says above, we're going to add $5 plus that $1.40 to get $6.40. So that way they can make a profit on what they're selling. Okay, so for the first three, figure out how much did it change, divide by the original amount, multiply by 100. The last two, we are given the percents. So when you're given the percents, turn it into a decimal, multiply by the original amount, and then figure out, do I need to subtract that number or do I need to add that number? If you have any questions, feel free to email me.